Welcome back to Link by Golf. In this week's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by an award-winning sports journalist, Andy Devlin. Andy has had a long career in journalism, covering sports such as football and rugby, but one of his passions in life has always been golf. In this episode, we hear from Andy on how he got into the game and also about his life and career. Let's go over to the show. On this week's show, I've got a good friend from school from many years ago. With us today is Andy Devlin. Andy, how you doing, mate? Long time.
Long time. Yes, I'm great, Ross. Great to see you, pal. Long time, as you say.
And you. That's brilliant. So, Andy, just to kick this off, where I want to start is basically where were you born? Where did you grow up? I know the part mostly what you grew up, but and how did you get into golf? So let's start with those.
Well, born and bred in Motherwell, Ross. As you know, I was born in the Motherwell maternity and lived there right through up until I was, well, when did I maybe move? 2009, I think, was when I left Motherwell. So I've been out of town for a wee while now, but yeah, basically born and bred. And as far as golf goes, it really was in the family, Ross. My dad kind of knocked his pan in 5-6 days a week. Early starts, late finishes. So Saturday was his day, and it was golf. A long-standing member at Shotts Golf Course, which I know you know well. In fact, it's only in the last year that he's had to stop playing just because of health reasons, you know. My Uncle Andy, sadly no longer with us. He was another great golfer. Played at Caldwell Park, but initially those early years, it was my dad who got us in. And I mean, I think easily from 5 or 6, Ross, I was playing golf and, you know, growing up with my dad because, as I say, he grafted 5 or 6 days a week, and he was out of the house for 4 in the morning. He didn't get back in at 7 o'clock at night. He was that exhausted he went his best. But we didn't really see my dad until the Saturday. So you wanted to spend a bit of time with him, you know. So that was a great thing, not just for me, but for my brothers when they came along as well. You know, you would go up there. So certainly the earliest memories would be playing up at Shotts, and my dad, that would lead to a kind of junior membership up there.
Were you a member there first? I didn't know that, Andy.
Yeah, I was, because, I mean, if you remember, Caldwell Park were quite strict in those days that you had to have a family member who had worked either in Caldwell's or in the Craig. And eventually, my gran, who, you know, knew your father from working, got me in. But initially, it was easier. My dad had got me into Shotts. The problem I had, you know, being that young, was getting from Motherwell to Shotts. You know, it was
it's not easy.
So unless my dad was there, you know, you couldn't just nip up and play around the golf, if you know what I mean.
No.
And then really from there, we kind of their summer holidays, Mum and Dad had a caravan, so we went to Arran and Port Patrick, places like that, and that's really where it all kind of took off.
And that's a great place, right? Plenty of golf courses, lots of folk going there in the summer.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we were fortunate. A couple of summers we really knocked it off weather-wise, and it was Lamlash we went to. So Lamlash, Brodick, in fact, you know, played every single course on the island. And as you say, I mean, I think that's quite a popular tourist spot now for golfers, is to go and play the courses now. So it was a great place to learn. There was none of this, you know, signing on, or, you know, you would just walk up. There was nobody there. You know, some of the wee courses inland, there was nobody there. So you just literally rocked up with your clubs, you know, play 9 holes or 12 holes, whatever it was, and come back off. So we had about 3 or 4 summers. Another place we went to was Port Patrick, the Dunsky course down at Port Patrick. They had a wee kind of par 3 just behind it, and it was a 9-holer, which was constituted of, it was all par 3s. So again, it was a great place to learn, you know, and you were never troubled. There was nobody up your backside and hurrying you. So I was fortunate. My dad was a good golfer. He was, you know, he could hit a ball, and he probably didn't have the patience in other aspects of life. But he did, funnily enough, see when it came to golf, he was great with us. I remember he was really good, and maybe less so when we were learning to drive and things like that. The patience went, but he was great at golf. And as I say, I was lucky. I had 2 younger brothers that came along
Yeah, of course.
And so we all, it was always a kind of a big thing in the family. My first clubs came from Uncle Andy, they were kind of cut down, and so I mean, it was really kind of from an early age, it was a big thing. And from Shorts, I got into Cobble Park, obviously, and that again, I mean, you'll know this story, Ross. Really, I would say from about primary 7 up until about 4th year, where other vices perhaps became apparent. I mean, your entire summer holidays, or in any school holidays, were centred around Cobble Park.
Yeah, totally.
My mum dropped us
every day.
Absolutely. My mum dropped us off at 8:30 in the morning. You'd go and play around the golf. You'd get in, you'd get your chips and gravy for £1. You get back, remember this? You'd get back out in the afternoon, you'd play another 18 holes, and my mum would pick us back up on her way home from work.
We played the loops, right? The Cobble Park was brilliant for that. You could play the first 3, you could play the first 6, the first 8, the first 12 and up 18. And we built tournaments around that as well, didn't we?
That's right. And it was great because everybody, I'm saying everybody, but a lot of the guys from school, a lot of your friends, either the same year as you, or perhaps a year, 2 years above you, or a year below you, they were all doing the same. And it was safe. Your parents knew where you were. You weren't getting into any trouble. It was exercise and it was enjoyable. And as I say, honestly, I would think for about primary 7 up until about maybe the summer of '91. That's really what summer holidays consisted of, was golf, and it was great. All your pals were there. It was always a good laugh, as you remember.
And it's funny you bring up primary 7. That was probably the age we met. In fact, it would have been the age we met. We met in the football pitch. And I don't know if you remember this, Andy, but you definitely broke my heart that day when you were playing for Now Top, because we managed to get to the Lanarkshire final basically at Fir Park, which was kind of our dream. We get beat. And then the next final we played was against you guys, and we get beat again. So thanks for that.
Was it not down Watling Street? Watling Street?
Yeah.
I do remember that. 4-0. Alan Dick scored. Sandy Stewart.
Was it as many as 4? Cheers.
That was the first time Now Top. That was the first time Now Top had won the league in about 50 odd years. Seriously, that's school.
Yeah, well, it was the first time ever for Lady Wells, so that was us bursting 2 occasions at that point, within about 3 weeks.
It was. I do remember that actually. I do remember the game. Yeah, I do.
That takes me on to your interest in football, Andy. So, as well as playing golf, I mean, I think for me, if I remember correctly, football was really one of your top passions. So do you want to talk a little bit about that in terms of playing, and it relates to where you've ended up as well?
Yeah, I mean, I did. I was always quite sporty. I enjoyed sports. And I remember football, obviously, without a doubt, was the big thing. It was just what we did, wasn't it? I mean, you come home from school, you rushed through your homework, and you went out and kicked the ball until the streetlights come on, and that's just the way it was. You were always out playing. It was funny. I can't remember why, but when we got to first year, Ross, there was an issue with the football team at the outset. I don't know if the teachers had been on strike.
Teacher strike stuff, wasn't it?
Aye. So we didn't. I know Mr. Hinshaw with Tom Chisel, as they called him.
Tom Chisel.
We'd pick that up. But initially there wasn't a football team, and we all got to first year. So, Peter Morton, another man you know really well, was the rugby. There was rugby, so everybody started to play rugby because it was something to do. So I then really got into the rugby. I really enjoyed playing rugby, and of course, I think maybe by the start of second year, the football team had started back up, and you went back to. If I remember, Peter Morton was talking to me for about 6 months because I went back to the football. But the rugby was great. I always remember there was a couple of guys who you just wouldn't, ever imagine playing rugby or being in a rugby park. But you're turning and saying, "This is great. You can punch the living hell out of this guy, and the referee doesn't do anything. You just play on." It was that's just terrific, So I was always really kind of sporty minded, and always enjoyed playing sports. I loved the team environment. I mean, we had BB, you had school football, you had BB football, or rugby, or whatever it was. I played for a boys' club, Jerviston. So I was always keen in football, and a lot of my early memories are centred around. I mean, I remember I remember watching the '82 World Cup, the Brazil Italy quarter final. I remember being on holiday in North Berwick and watching that. in Argentina. It was just always, you know, it was just always something that had my interest, and I enjoyed playing it. And I think that's probably, I mean, I quickly realised, you know, you think you can play the game and you think, well, I'm going to do this for a living, and then reality bites, you know. I remember it was Craig Brown came to give a talk at the school. Now, Craig would be the assistant manager of Scotland at the time, and he came to give a talk to the football team at the school.
I don't remember. Well, I wasn't in the football team because I was not good at football. I don't remember that. Wow.
He came to give a talk, you know, just about, you know, life as a professional footballer. And I remember he kind of one of the kind of things he said, no, listen, you know, you boys all want to be football players, but I've got to tell you, it's a difficult road, and it's, you know, it's not cut out where it's, you know, when you think it's going to be. In fact, I'd probably say 90% of you will never become professional footballers. And I'm looking about thinking, well, he's better than me. So I mean, I said to Craig Brown, you know, once in a professional capacity, once I got to know him through my work, I said, you actually shattered my dreams of becoming a professional footballer. So I think that kind of led me to, all right, okay, I'm not going to make it as a footballer. What's a vehicle to allow me to still enjoy it? And that's maybe where the journalism thing came from, because really, first couple of years at school, Ross, I had no idea what I was going to do, you know.
Yeah, and I was going to actually ask that, Andy. So, what kind of age did you really think about the journalism side? I thought it was maybe about 15, but I can't really trace that back. Was it maybe 14, 15 kind of age?
I don't know about you, but I mean, school for me, Ross, it's split into two. When I look back now, school was split into two parts for me. First year up until maybe midway through fourth year, it was just a carry on. It was just a complete carry on.
Familiar, Andy.
Aye. I mean, I wasn't a bad boy. I wasn't getting suspended or whatever, but I was a bit of a rascal. I probably had far too much to say for myself, and I liked to carry on. And then
I think we all did, Andy, to be fair.
Aye. It was just maybe where we were brought up, and just I don't know, just the whole thing, you know, I wasn't interested in learning. It was just a carry on, and you still had that feel safe of the kind of, or the steel industry was you know, it was clear the road on which it was, you know, was destined to go down, but you still had a bit of a fail safe. I know Billy Connolly makes the kind of reference between the shipyards and Govan, you know, the school doors open their doors, and the shipyards open their doors, and everybody pours in. There was maybe an element of that for me as well. I thought, well, you know, I'll pick up something, whether it's in Covels or whatever. And then obviously, you know, 1991 when it closes, you kind of really give fingers.
It was devastating for the town, eh? I mean, absolutely. I remember the first 6 months after basically Ravenscraig shut, I remember the town being very vibrant. That's my recollection. But then I think, you know, the redundancy money that maybe people had got, and just the reality of such a big employer in our town started to hit, and it became very tough for people.
Absolutely, and I remember relatives saying to me, you know, Motherwell will become a ghost town, and sadly, I think there's certainly I mean, it's years since I've been up the town centre, but I mean, I think there's an element of that. You know, from you, great memories again as a kid. I've been up there, and it's just a very vibrant place, and you know, everybody knowing one another, and a friendly, safe environment to go about your business. I mean, it's devastating what it did to the area. So I mean, I think it was probably around about then. I don't know. I remember guy, it was a couple of years above his game, Faulkner, calling me Scoop one day, and so I mean, I must have that about fourth year, so I mean, I had about 15, so I must have made mention of it at that point, you know, that this is something that I wanted.
That's a great point. That wasn't related to the English class jibe from the teacher, and we'll protect innocent. We won't name the teacher, but I'd love you to talk about that story. I think that's a really incredible part of what happened.
I mean, as I say, I always remember it was after a particularly fraught parents' night at school, let's say. Now, my mum, you could get caught drinking, you could get caught smoking, she would be angry, but you know, she would let it go after a day or two. If you were messing about at school because she was a school teacher, then she would come down.
Remember that part, eh?
Yeah, she would come down on you like a ton of bricks. And I clearly hadn't been given it my full attention, let's say. And after a particularly fraught parents' evening with Mrs. Rennie, and I always look at this part, and it was really down to her, Mrs. Rennie, Mr. Morton, who we've spoken about, Mr. Tweedy, they were really the three teachers who really kind of turned it around for me, really kind of made me think and made me realise, listen, it's all well and good having a laugh, but what are you going to do in 2 years' time, So I had been a particularly fraught. I was no good at maths, but I was in the top English class, and I always enjoyed the creative writing end of the English class as well. So in those days, you had to queue, line up outside the classroom before we went in, and obviously the night before it was a fraught parents' evening, let's say. So I had gone in with my sidekick, another man, very well, Kenny McAlpine. Now, we had started the year at the back of the class. By this point, I think this must have been about November. We're very much down the front of the class where she could keep an eye on us. And Mrs. Rennie obviously knew that everybody else had got a great report from her the night before. Everybody's parents, I should say, had got a great report. So she kind of looked at Kenny and I, and the two of us were just, I've been warned within an inch of my life by my mother to knuckle down. And so I remember Mrs. Rennie saying, good morning, boys, or something, and I just thought, oh, very good, and from nowhere she said, I mean, what is it you boys want to do with your lives? What is it you want to do? And I had no idea Kenny wanted to be a journalist either, and we both said almost in sync, well, I want to be a journalist, Miss. We both said it, and she kind of, in that way of first, the only paper you boys will ever work for is the Sun, And off she went. So 8 years later, that came to pass because I joined the Sun in the summer of 2000, 24 years ago, and Kenny was already there. He was a news reporter at the time. So we decided that when Kenny had the front story of the newspaper, I had the story, the lead in the back page, we would send a copy of the paper to Mrs. Rennie, and a couple of months after we got there, that's what happened. Kenny had a front page news story, and I was in the back. So we sent off a newspaper to Mrs. Rennie. Thanking her for basically making us see the light and knuckling down. Because without really those three teachers, you really don't know what would happen, but they made you think, like, okay, I'm gonna knuckle down here and try and do something in my life,
You say that, Andy. My recollection, definitely on the fun side for sure. But then one of the things that you did, and I was one of your key backers, was you were school captain at DL as well. So do you want to talk a wee bit about that?
I mean, that was again, there was a thing, I remember, the Coral Shield at school. When I got to fourth year, I get involved in when I think of myself, first, second year to what I was towards, the last few years of school, just a totally different person. But the Coral Shield I thought was great. I loved it. It was a good carry on, a good laugh, and all the rest of it. So I was vice captain of the house in fifth year, which was Barclay. And the 6 years, the guys who had been the school captain had said, you should go for it. And I just thought, why not? Why not? A kind of a laugh type of thing. Why not? And I remember the head teacher, whenever the votes were counted, and the teachers I think had a vote as well when it came to the captain. And obviously I had a lot of pupil votes, but the teacher vote kind of maybe less so. But I remember getting into the office with Amanda. Well, it was Amanda Russell at that point, Amanda McCullough now. She was the vice captain. I remember the two of us getting into Brian Miller, who was the head teacher at the time, getting into his office, and Mr. Miller basically making it abundantly clear that if he had his way, there was no chance I'd have been school captain. But again, I left that office, Ross, thinking, do you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to show you. I don't know why. I just thought to myself, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to do a good job of this. I'm going to step up, if you like. And I liked the thing I did. It was great. So actually, you think back now, and it was a real honour to be captain of the school. And it probably didn't have the name. Deal didn't have the name that it's got now. I think. Again, I saw it's just been named the top school in Lanarkshire. It probably didn't have that name, but it was certainly building towards that at that point.
I think the interesting thing, Andy, is when you reflect back, and we've just talked about Motherwell being a steel town. One of the things that the school was very fortunate with was having basically, I think it was Covels gave the school the stay up at Cleland, an estate, right? And you would, however many rugby pitches, the fact we played rugby in Motherwell was quite unusual. Obviously, Peter Morton had a great influence on that. And then there was hockey pitches, there was football pitches, floodlights, training at night time with the club, and all kinds of things. I think we were very fortunate in that regard.
No, absolutely. I mean, you lay it all out there, and I know some people didn't enjoy it, but see that when you were told you were going to Cleland for the scrambling, you know,
happy days.
Magnificent, you know. I mean, I didn't particularly enjoy hockey, but I played it because you were outside, you were out the classroom, and as you say, listen, Cleland served a purpose for so many years, and it's obviously been redeveloped into a, you know, what DL Park is now. But for kids of our generation and before then, to have that facility, you know, on your doorstep, bus up, bus back, magnificent and great memory. And again, it kind of led me into, you know, the FP side of it as well. So when I left school, you know, funnily enough, I kept playing rugby. I'd played rugby at the start. I'd gone to play football and ended up back playing rugby. And I continued to play rugby for a good few years after I left school. Obviously, my work situation meant that, you know, it couldn't continue. But I was looking back on Facebook. Actually, I went back 9 years ago last week. I went back and played a game. I kind of came out of retirement. Cracked 3 ribs, busted above my eye, and my knee was all swollen up. So that was the last time I had my boots on. But great, was fantastic. I mean, just sitting smiling thinking about it. They were great days, you know, really well.
Absolutely. And then from DL, Andy, you went to study journalism, and there wasn't a lot of places in Scotland that offered journalism. So do you want to talk about where you went and how that came about?
It was Kenny McAlpine again. We were the two of us. I think Kenny, again, I was kind of chasing my tail a wee bit in terms of applying for things. And as you say, there was one at Napier, which was a degree thing, you know, 4 years. I just didn't fancy that at all. Didn't really particularly at that point want to get through Edinburgh either or move. So the only other one was Bell College, it was Bell College then in Hamilton, which was an HND course. So applied, got accepted for that, and did my 2 years there. You obviously had to learn shorthand, which I still use to this day, believe it or not. I mean, you don't really have cause for it anymore because everyone's recorded in your phones. But in those days, when I first started off, you had to do court reporting at local papers, and obviously you weren't allowed electronic devices or dictaphones into the court. So that, and you learned about the legal side and economics. So I did my 2 years there, and when it kind of 2 years was coming to an end, we started off with a class of about 30, and by the end of it, I think it basically reduced by a half. I think there were about 14, 15 people left. You know, people had just dropped out. You know,
wow.
Which I don't know, but obviously it wasn't for them. But again, you have, say, a core of 14, 15 people all going for jobs. Now, I kind of look back and how things went for me, and a great deal of fortune, Ross, you know, a great deal of luck, I think, as well, comes into it. In those days, you couldn't just leave college and go and start at the Sun or the Daily Record. It just didn't happen. You had to go and learn your trade and cut your teeth at a local newspaper. So the first job that came up was for the Irvine Times, and you know, everyone for the course applied for it, and Kenny McAlpine got it. Kenny McAlpine got the job. So off he went, and about a fortnight later, a job appeared for a junior reporter at the Rutherglen Reformer, the Reformer newspaper, which was part of the Hamilton Advertiser Wisher Press Group.
Right. Yeah.
So I applied for that along with everybody else, and here it was my turn. I got the job. So Kenny and I were the first two out of the college course to get jobs. You know.
You were obviously sitting at the front of the English class for a reason. You were going to be first out.
Going to be first out.
First out into the world. That's awesome. That's a brilliant story.
The editor was an old fella for that, Paul, and I remember saying to him, maybe about 6 months later, you know, why had he given me the job? And he said, look, he I felt sure if you had to go and chap somebody's door and ask a difficult question, you would. You had that kind of way about you, and I can take it as a compliment, I suppose.
I think it's good, definitely. It's not an easy job, Andy, as you know way better than the vast majority of people.
Certainly that side of it, the news side of it, can be quite difficult. So I was there for maybe a year, and I was asked, excuse me, to go to the Wisher Press, which was obviously a lot more handy for me in terms of travelling, and it was an area that I knew, and so I was quite fortunate when I went to the Wisher Press, because there was a lot of things happening. You had the DLO scandal at the North Lanarkshire Council. You had the Bar the Butcher, the E. coli.
Oh wow! Was that when you were working there?
Yeah.
My goodness.
So, and you had John Boyle coming into Motherwell at the time, and that I had said to the guy who had offered me the job at the Wisher Press that I would come as long as I got to do the football. Got to do the sport, because this is where I wanted to go. So I started doing Motherwell games, and from there I got to know some of the guys who were reporting for the national newspapers. The one guy in particular being a chap called Ian King. So he got me in. By this point, I started doing games for the kind of Sunday Mail the weekend. Just kind of second, third division stuff, which was good. Everybody was learning how to file on phone on copy. To deadlines, which is something a local paper you don't really work towards. You've always got plenty of time. So that was good. But did maybe about a year there as well, and then Ian King had gone from the Sunday Mail to head up First Press Publishing, which was almost a kind of subsidiary of the Daily Record and the Sunday Mail at that point.
Right.
They owned the Rangers News and the Celtic View at that point. So the Rangers News were looking for a reporter, and Ian put my name forward. And I think that was the middle of, or the beginning of December 99, or 98, I should say. And by the January, it was all done and dusted by the middle of December. And my first day, I basically flew to Florida with the Rangers team, because it was the winter breaks in those days, and they used to go to America. So I flew. Basically, my first day in the job was going to Miami to go.
And who was the manager at that time, Andy?
Dick Advocaat was in charge.
So that's just after the McLeish part as well.
No, just Walter
just
Smith.
Before it, wasn't
it? Dick Advocaat. So it was in '99. I went there. So it was. '98. I was there for a year, and then I joined the Sun in 2000. Again, Ian King had left, had taken up a job at the Sun, and there was another job became available, and he put my name forward, and I went for an interview and got the job, and that was 24 years ago, my friend.
That's incredible.
I always remember the guy Jim Black, who used to do the golf, Jim Black. Remember him saying to me at the time, if you do 3 months, we had at the time was a sports editor called Steve Wilsoncroft, a legendary figure, but I mean a real hard taskmaster, and I learned so much from him. I worked I ended up working with him for 7 years, and I think I made a mistake once, and he was down in a ton of bricks, calling me this, that, and the next thing, threatening me with all sorts. And I'll tell you what, I never made the mistake again.
I bet you didn't.
He just made you. It was the kind of fear factor, in those days there was a kind of revolving door in newspapers. So if you weren't producing stories, if you weren't, if your writing wasn't up to start, if you missed a deadline, you lived in fear of the sack, because in those days they could sack you. So it was a fraught 7-year period, but I'll tell you, I learned.
It's a tough industry, isn't it? Very tough.
So as I say, initially I remember Jim telling me, if you do 3 months, you'll do well, and that's me. 24 years I've been there now. Jeez.
And so, in terms of working for the Sun, what kind of events in terms of football, and I know you covered some other sports as well when you had to. What kind of events would you be covering? What kind of things would you be into? What sort of people were you meeting at that point?
Early doors, it was a kind of predominantly football. That's what I was brought on board to do. But I was looking. There was my sports editor just now had came across a photograph of myself and Dennis Taylor, which was taken in his house in Blackburn on September 11th, 2001. I was driving back up the road when we discovered the Twin Towers were forming as well, because you had a chief football writer, you had a chief sports writer, you had guys who were further up the food chain than me. So you would get to do the bigger games now and again, but it wasn't always there. So it was good because being a Motherwell lad, it allowed me to go back to my roots, if you like, back into Motherwell. You build up contacts at clubs like Motherwell, Kilmarnock, St Mirren, the smaller clubs, not the Old Firm, out with the Old Firm, the smaller clubs, which stand you in good stead, because there is a natural progression. People will retire, people will move on, and you will eventually get a crack at the big time. But the first 4 or 5 years, I'm not saying you were filling in round the edges, because you did get to do bigger games, but you were still very much learning your trade. It was a completely see, going from the Wisher Press or even the Rangers News, okay, you were working within the footballing environment, but going to the biggest national newspaper in the country, it was, unbelievable, the difference in terms of standard, quality, pressure, you name it. It was just, the level went through the roof, really. So it took a wee bit to adjust and get used to it, and then you get into a kind of routine. And as I say, there is a natural progression. People retire and move on, and but all that. I mean, Wilson Croft was very good, because all that was training for when you would get. It's like a football player waiting for his chance. Somebody would be sick, somebody would be on holiday, and you would get an opportunity. And if you made a backside of it at a big event, you wouldn't get another opportunity for months. You would be back. It was almost like that. So if you didn't perform, you were taken out the firing line. You had to be at that level. So I mean, it was manic, Steve. It really was. The best example, Ross, I'll give you is the night James McFadden scored in Paris. We beat France.
Who could forget that? What a goal!
Paddy scored. Now, it was myself and Bill Leckie, well-known journalist. Bill and I were there covering the game for the Scottish Sun, and Faddy scores. Now, it's the only time I've ever been in a press box where all the Scottish press got up and everybody was cheering and going bananas, and you just couldn't believe what we were watching. So I had 900 words of a match report to write, and they have these things down the side, the ratings, which they call man demands. Now, it was 30 words. It was at kick-off, it was 30 words a man. So I had that to do as well. So McFadden scores, Scotland are winning 1-0. Now, you look at the quality of that French side. 10 minutes after the goal, my phone goes and it's Wilson Croft. Right, we're increasing the man by mans. I want 90 words a man. And I said, what? He says, I want 90 words a man on each player. I say, Steve, I've got my match today, 90 words a man, he says, split it with Bill. So I had to split. Bill did like 5 players, and I did the other 6 players. You're sitting like that with Rick Wakeman. So your match, the magnitude of it. So the final whistle goes, and again, the entire Scottish press corps out their seat, and then I'm thinking, well, wait a minute here, just so you sit and clatter the match, you get your man bands tidied up, but you're on deadline as well, so you're having to get the stuff across. And
that must be a strange feeling, Andy, where being Scottish and at that game, I mean, what a goal for a start, and what a result. And then you've got all the pressure after the game finishes.
That is the only time I've seen it, even in the rugby environment, where you don't. People say, oh, you're fans with typewriters, but seeing that circumstance, you don't really have time to think about what's going on in the park or whatever. You're just focused on getting your work done. So the final whistle went, and the phone goes again, and it's Wilsty in the phone saying, right, we're doing a pull out. And I said, what? He said, we're going to do a pull out. And I says, what do you mean a pull out? I says, what does that mean? He says, it means you interview anybody in a Scotland shirt, and get the words over to me. So Bill and I, it was chaotic. So anything that moved with a Scottish SF connection to the SFA was getting interviewed. Now, in those days, we travelled with the team. We travelled with the team in those days.
Yeah.
So you're sitting on the bus, clattering out, all these words. And I remember you had to, you plugged your phone into your computer to
Right.
this was your light, your kind of signal. So you plugged your phone into your Tandy machine, and it sent through this. There was no Wi-Fi or anything. I'm sitting up the back of the plane trying to get a signal, screaming at the pilot, not to close the door because I still had one story to file. But there's about 2 or 3 other guys, and they say, "Don't, 2 minutes, don't shut the door." Just trying to get the stuff away. And I remember feeling absolutely, just drained, just absolutely drained. Get back into Glasgow at say 2 a.m, and this was the genius of Wilsday. So I'd still be living in Motherwell at the time. So say you're home at 3:30 from the game and from the airport. My phone went again at 8 o'clock that morning, and it was Wilsday. Now, he knew that I had a relationship with Faddy, and I had got stories from McFadden in the past, and he'd been good with me.
Right.
He was
because he was at Motherwell.
Because he'd been at Motherwell, and I had got to know him quite well. So he picks up the phone, or dials my number at 8 o'clock in the morning. There's not that was brilliant last night, well done. His words were, "You know what you need to do today, get me McFadden on the phone," and he hung up. So, you've gone. Aye. So you've gone from, you're totally drained to get into your bed. You've had 4 hours sleep to picking up the phone, and you're under pressure again. So I remember I phoned Faddy straight away. Honestly, I must have phoned that poor boy about 40 times that day, and I'm texting him. I said, you need to answer, blah blah blah. And I was in the office by this point, so it must have been about 10 to 5, and here my phone goes, and it was him. And he was driving, he was playing for Everton at the time. So he'd been up, he'd stayed at his parents in Glasgow, and he was driving back down. So he gave me the story that, I said, "What did you do when you get in?" He says, "Oh, my mum was waiting up for me. She gave me a rolling sausage and a cup of tea." So, Scotland Star celebrates with a rolling square. And honestly, Ross, I came off that phone, and I said to, I did that to Wilson, I said, "I've got him." And he's leaping up, and he finally says, "Great job, brilliant," and that was. But 24 the following morning, you're back into right. What else is going on? That was the kind of environment at the time. It was great. The buzz was incredible. It's not the same. It's definitely not the same edge now, because newspapers, the whole kind of news gathering way of going about it, and everything's changed. It's digitally driven. You also don't get youngsters coming in now, Ross. They don't get the opportunity that we had in those days of getting to know football players, building up a relationship with them, building up gaining their trust. It's the same with managers are maybe slightly different, but clubs nowadays, they don't. It's all media's done in house. So the kind of kids coming through, the next generation, if you like, they don't have the ability to just go and pick up the phone to somebody and say, "Right, oh, listen, I'm needing 800 words on whatever. Can you talk about it?" They don't have that bank of contacts, because you don't get close to football players anymore. It's just
how much
the whole dynamic.
Those kind of times, how much time would you spend in front of these guys? Trying to build that relationship.
A hell of a lot, and you would text and you would phone. A great thing would be getting, you would get your photographer to maybe get pictures of them, and if they'd scored a goal, you get a celebration pic for the weekend, and there was a lot of times as well. You would hear things, you would get told things, but you would say, "Listen, I've heard this, but I'm not going to write it. Don't worry." So you would get their trust. They would be telling you things that were helpful in terms of stories, but you'd also be telling them things about, "Listen, such and such is interested in you." You're almost a kind of acting as an agent, if you like. But it was just the way things worked back then. You got contact with players, you were able to build trust, and I like to say, I was quite fortunate. They had that grounding at Rangers, so there were so many world-class stars at Rangers at that point that it was a great bank of contacts straight away. The likes of Faddy, as I said to you, those early years at the Sun were built up going around the clubs again, so you're getting to know players out with the old firm. So again, it was all But that's what you mean. The editor, sports editors nowadays, Ross, would tell you, listen, why are you in the office? You're just getting under my feet. Go out to St Mirren, go down to Kilmarnock, go and speak to somebody. You know, that's how it worked. Go and get your story.
It's funny, one of my favourite shows, I don't tend to listen to it live, but Off the Ball with Tam Cowan and Stuart Cosgrove. Tam was talking about very similar things the other day. Him being a Motherwell lad as well.
There's always going to be room for proper journalism to call, you know, when there are difficult questions to be asked, you know, you're going to need people who are trained as journalists to do it. That's my fear, that you erode it completely, and you don't have proper investigative journalists being able to do their job, because there's...
Listening to another podcast tonight called the Chipping Forecast, and it was funny, they were talking about the interviews at the Masters, and apparently some guy had rocked up and Rory McIlroy's only going to do 10 minutes, which is nothing for him, really.
Yeah.
And the guys asked him a question, some bizarre question about a rule change, and the other journalists are just like, really? Got 10 minutes for this guy and you'd ask them about some stupid rules change? What are you thinking?
It's funny. You can see the difference between a tabloid journalist and a broadsheet journalist, because quite often we find ourselves in these situations, especially when they have these things after bigger games called a mix zone, where players, not everybody's meant to come through, but you know, maybe only a handful do. But you know, realistically, you're only going to get 2-3 minutes tops before the press officer pushed away. And as you say, you know, the guys like myself who are tabloid background, you know, we're in there for the kill straight away, because you know we don't have time. Meanwhile, there's somebody giving it, what the youth development set up at your club, you know, and how do you see that filtering through? Shut up! Shut up! You're just like, you know, we'll have a
tag team with your mates to drag the guys away.
It's funny, but that is true. That a lot of that goes on. You know, just listen, just shut up. We'll ask the questions and send you his coach. It's terrible, but a lot of that goes on, mate.
And talking of golf, but other sports. So you did cover, and you do cover rugby as well. And I think you mentioned when we caught up a couple of weeks back about the Olympics. Do you want to talk about some of those experiences as well, Andy?
I started doing the rugby maybe about 2009, 2010. I was a freelance chap, did it for us for a while, and circumstances changed and I got sent. So I would say, Ross, I mean, I've been, again, I keep saying it, but I mean, I've been so fortunate. I've travelled the world in somebody else's coin, and I've been to places I would never dreamed of visiting or seeing, you know, some obscure places in Europe, never mind anything else. Probably the greatest thing I ever had the fortune of doing was the British Lions tour in Australia in 2013, which was just incredible from start to finish. So I mean, that's 11 years ago, but it just shows you how things have changed so dramatically in a newspaper environment. We travelled with the team, the squad. We stayed in the same hotels as the team and the squad, and you know, you were lifted and laid for 6 weeks going around about Australia. I mean, it was just
that's a level of access you wouldn't normally have, right? Nowhere near it.
Absolutely not. Absolutely. I remember the night of the third and final test, and said, I think the Lions thought going on that tour it would be relatively straightforward. They'd probably win 2-0, and that would be it. They could have a week, because we went to a place on the Gold Coast, Noosa Point, Noosa Heads, which paradise on earth, stunning place. But of course they had lost the test in Melbourne, which meant it was all to play for in Sydney. The Lions won the game in Sydney, and after the game there was three Scots guys: Richie Gray, Stuart Hogg, and Sean Maitland. Ryan Grant, the prop, get drafted in a wee bit later on, I think just before the second test. But we had a column with Richie Gray, who's still playing.
All right.
Great, fantastic guy.
Yeah, great player, right?
Fantastic. So we had a column. So it was great. It was access all areas. You did what you want. You just sat down, and the press officer brought these guys to. It's a lot of English guys and English players as a columnist. I mean, I was the only Scottish journalist there at one point, because there was just the dearth of Scottish players on the entire tour.
Yeah.
Ian Morrison later joined me. So it was great. So I remember being in the bowels of this stadium in Sydney, and interviewing Richie when he gets a a tap in his back and the hand extended, and it's James Bond. Daniel Craig was in Sydney.
What?
Filming, so Daniel Craig was going round, he'd been at the game and was basically going round the line squad. So I mean, it was totally surreal. After the game, we're in the hotel bar. Warren Gatlin, I said one or two shandies, shall we say, and basically let slip to myself and a colleague at the Daily Mail in England that he was ready to walk away in between the second and third test. He dropped Brian O'Driscoll and the Irish press had gone for him, and he just said, I said to my wife I was going, but me standing at the bar telling us this, you know. And I said to the boy, what? He said, yeah, I think we need to use that. I said, well, you're doing him in a wee bit, you know. Ordinarily I wouldn't do it, but so we ended up with, he ran the story and I ran the story, and I got a hero gun because I was doing it for the whole. It wasn't just the Scottish Sun; it was a nationwide thing.
Yeah, of course.
So, but that Ross was. I had always, because I was into my rugby, I always wanted. It was a bucket list thing, you know. I thought if one day if I retire, I would like to go and follow the lines round somewhere. So to actually get to do it for Zach basically was incredible. A great, still to this day friendly with a lot of the guys who made me feel really welcome on. As I say, I was only Scottish journalist there, but the boys really, you know, took me in and made me feel welcome because I was a wee bit apprehensive travelling.
Surely you were pushing in for a wee backup squad place, Andy, at that point.
Might have been. No, the 2013, probably not. Probably not. But no, very, very fortunate. Very fortunate.
And around that time, Andy, I think it was around that time, I was driving to work one day and I'm listening to Talk Sport, right? I'm listening to Brazil and I'm sure it was McCoist. And it comes on that says, next up, Andy Devlin. And I'm driving, I'm thinking, I don't know many guys called Andy Devlin in the world. And there, suddenly you come on. So do you want to talk a wee bit about that experience and how you got into that?
I did radio for a wee while, gosh. It was initially it was Ewan Cameron Ruffy. It was the football show, right, on Real Radio, which I did maybe for 3 years, kind of mid noughties. I did 3 years. Used to go in and do the studio. It was filmed, and towards the end it was filmed in Santa. I enjoyed it. Enjoyed it at the start. It was good. It kind of tended to get a wee bit repetitive because 9 times out of 10 it was somebody on about Rangers or it was somebody on about Celtic. So once you've made your initial point at the top of the show, you know, somebody else will come on and ask you pretty much the same question. So you find yourself going round in circles a wee bit. It's just, listen, it's the nature of the beast up here. It's Rangers and Celtic, as you know. I mean, there's other clubs here, but that's what you know. That's what people tune in to listen to. That's what drives newspaper sales or online hits. It's Rangers and Celtic, and that won't ever change. So I did that, and yeah, you get asked to do a wee bit of talk sport here and there, bit of television. But as the older I've got, Ross, I prefer I'm on Twitter, but that's through the work. You're made to do Twitter. I stay off these social media platforms because it's just it's a cesspit, you know. The abuse you get, it's just, and I can't be doing with the hassle. So I enjoyed it when I did it. It was good. It was another kind of good learning experience, if you like. But I much prefer the kind of quiet life now. Just do what I need to do, get out the door at night.
I'm sure that's not true. So Andy, it's been amazing hearing about your experiences, and I just want to circle back to the golf. So we'll do some quick hit questions on golf then, right? So you've continued to play, I understand. So how often are you playing these days?
Not as much as I would like, my friend. Definitely not. Again, work just kind of everything's dictated around about then. But I mean, I try and get about 3 or 4 games in a year if possible. Couple of times. In fact, the last time I played with my brothers, I still try and go out with them and play with them because it means a lot. The last time we all played together was Mum and Dad's 50th wedding anniversary. I mean, we had gone back to Arran this weekend. Yeah. So my dad, I knew, I said to you and I said to my middle brother, I said, you just wonder if this will be the last time we're all out on a golf course together, because my dad was getting a wee bit lame. So I try and go with them. Still guys that, you know, Jimmy Kitt and Graham Blackwood, guys that Brian Taylor.
I was going to say, I didn't even mention we were talking about Covell Park, the Jimmy Cup and Invitational. Remember doing them, the wee competitions, 12 up 18?
Aye, so these boys are still hitting the ball. So I try and get. I find as well, if I don't, my run about my short games are deplorable. It's absolutely, it's gone. It's
right.
Absolutely. I can still smash a ball off a tee. Getting to the green isn't an issue. It's run about the green and on the green. It is. But again,
what happens when you don't get the chance to play, though. That's what happens.
If your touch deserts you. So that lets me down badly at the moment.
So I'm thinking this might be related to what you've just talked about. Favourite course in Scotland? What's your favourite place to play if you can get out?
The best course I've ever played, Royal Dornoch.
I had a pod. The first episode was the pro there, Gary Dingwall, one of the pros. Gary played out of Wishaw, and he's up there. I've heard it's stunning.
That was 10 years ago, Ross. It was a Rangers pre-season thing. You mentioned McCoist and Durant were up, and we got on. It was a glorious summer evening, and just a spectacular golf course. And I think because it was so light, you're that far north. It was like 10 o'clock at night, and it was still sunlight. It was a spectacular setting. Greens out of this world. They were out of this world. Just a fantastic golf course. So I would say that's probably up there with the best I've played.
And that's amazing. What a coincidence. And this is not planned. This is not planned, right? We did not do a lot of prep for this. Because you're definitely way more experienced at this than me. But genuinely with Gary, what I was talking to him about was Greg Norman had said that Dornoch is pretty much his favourite place to play. At night time, about 8 o'clock, and the light's amazing. You got there and it's just magical.
That's exactly. It was maybe about 6:45, 6:45 we went out, and it was just one of those things. I've pictures on my phone. One of those things. I mean, that would be 10 years ago this summer we played there, and it's just something it stayed with me. It was just a spectacular, calm, no hint of wind, and as I say, the course was spectacular condition. Scenery was stunning, and as you say, just the light, the way it was all lit up with the sun going down, spectacular. Really, really,
you can imagine I'm going to be tapping Gary pretty soon to try and get up there. I've been trying for a while.
Not
his fault, my problem. I need to try and get there.
Have you never played it?
No.
Yes.
It's going to happen. Don't worry. It'll happen, Andy. So, next golf question. Favourite golfer? Who's your favourite golfer out there? Past or present? It could be.
Seve, all day long. That's one of my early memories. I remember watching him winning the Open, I think it was 84. Remember watching that. He was the one. If you were out, hitting the ball on the bit of grass at your house where you shouldn't be hitting a golf ball, you always used to kid on about 7, No ball games, is that right?
Where we used to play football as well. I don't know if you remember that. It doubled, actually, probably quadrupled in terms of you play football, you play golf there, you're playing tennis. Tennis, loose description, obviously, where you're making your own net out of bread crates, right?
We get used to be the garden key, your mum's bit of your mum's washing line, 2 garden keys. And that was your 2 years, 2 weeks of the year in the summer when Wimbledon was on. Carried on playing tennis. But that was it. That's just what you did, wasn't it?
And fun enough, actually, Andy, that's amazing. Seve, him winning that Open was what got me going. I'd had a golf club apparently when I was about 3 or something. My uncle got one cut down. But I watched that Open, then I basically went into my brother's golf bag and nicked a club, a 7-iron, and a couple of golf balls, and away I went down to an ash pitch, a red ash pitch, and that was where I started.
Without blowing smoke up your backside, you were one of the best, in terms of striking the ball cleanly. I'd never seen. I enjoyed playing golf, mate. But I mean, remember those days up there. I mean, you were just another level even. What are you playing off just now?
I'm playing off one now, but there's, what Covell Park then became, Andy, the guys that joined, and I mean the games I was playing, we got some just real superstars. Stephen O'Hara, Paul O'Hara, Ross Kellett, never mind all the other guys that played off scratch and below. So, yeah, it was just definitely a level way below them, but I suppose a decent player.
No. Well, you were, I mean, in terms of natural striking the ball, mate, dearie me, smash it for miles. I could never hit anything below. Anything, a 3-iron and below, forget it. I could never ever hit, but you could hit long irons as well.
Well, it probably didn't help that I nicked your driver one time.
Aye.
My first
Remember
ever steel-headed driver, I basically nicked yours.
I remember you were the first guy I ever saw actually screw it back on the green. You remember those things? Was it ballatas they call? Remember the ballatas?
Aye.
I remember you, the fourth at Covels, 3-par-3. Remember you spinning the ball back, and I'm thinking, wait a minute here, what's that? Remote control?
Probably get somebody to chuck it back, Andy, to be fair.
Well, that's honestly, you're the first person I ever saw do that in a golf. Well, actually, being on the golf course, seeing somebody doing it, Anyway,
so, I'll take you away from me, but I'll get back to it. So, most famous person or a famous person you've played with, who would that be?
Oh, jeez. Well, probably quite a few, actually. Most famous person?
Or just a famous person? Chuck one out.
Well, I played with Mr. McCoy, stuff around the golf with Walter at one point.
Oh, wow.
I played a thing that was a pro-am, and Kenny Dalglish was in my team, Kenny Dalglish.
And you're not talking about Kenny Dalglish with Covell Park either?
No.
Remember that?
No. This was a thing at Cameron House. Kenny Dalglish. I think he actually had something to do with organising it. And it was myself, another chap for the work. I probably say Kenny Dalglish.
Remember the other one we had at Covell's? So we could all say that we played golf with Kenny Dalglish at Covell Park. Yeah. And then Stephen Hendry. There's a guy called Stephen Hendry.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So there was. Yeah. Aye. So there was.
So then, best golfer, and I jokingly put in my little thing here, apart from me, obviously. Who's the best golfer you played with?
Genuinely you. You. No, honestly, I mean...
we're going to have to cut this part out, Andy. It's getting too much now.
Kenny Dalglish obviously was a great
He's a good player.
Very good player, because that's what he was doing. That's what he'd done for the last 20 odd years, was play golf based in La Manga, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But no, genuinely, and I mean this, I would say you, mate, just in terms of going round and thinking, bloody hell, how's he hit that? How's he done that? Just in terms of clean striking of a golf ball. But I mean, you were doing that, Jez, when we were, sorry, Ross, I'm calling you Shed.
Oh, you can call me Shed, come on, it's a golf podcast. Andy, nobody in Motherwell knows my name is Ross.
Yeah, tell me, did I give you that nickname?
I think you were certainly one of the people that would have said it a lot. I'm pretty sure it was Gary Groves.
Right, okay.
I came in with a ridiculous. It was probably either you, Gary Groves, or wee Darren Cornelius. One of the three. And the link between me, you, and Darren that you've just, I didn't know this either. Ironically, is I was born on the same day as Darren in Motherwell maternity, but you were obviously born the same year in Motherwell maternity, which I didn't know.
April 76.
Maternity.
So,
brilliant.
Remember Colin Blair? He was the day after me. He was 20. I was the 28th April. Colin Blair was the 29th. So his mum was in the next bed to my mum when we were.
That's amazing that we all ended up at school together, isn't it?
Bonkers.
So I know, Andy, look, I've kept you way over time here, but there's a part that I wanted to talk to you about, and we caught up about this when we first talked. I want to point out we hadn't spoken to each other probably for 25 years, maybe more. So first of all, thanks for that. But there's a cause that's really important for you, Andy, and your family. Do you want to just talk about that in terms of a takeaway for the listeners?
Yeah, it's a charity called Chuff, which is the Children's Heart Unit Foundation. 2014, my nephew Drew was diagnosed with a condition called restrictive cardiomyopathy. Basically, the heart wall wasn't growing, and after kind of a couple of weeks, it was made clear that the only option was a transplant, a heart transplant. So it was a kind of fraught that was kind of September 2014, and by the January 2015, he was so unwell. He was the Freeman Hospital in Newcastle took his case on and took him in. My brother Ewan and my sister-in-law Karen had him down, and within a matter of hours, he was hooked up to machines and monitors. And then, you know, you're waiting, you're praying, and our prayers were answered on the 17th of March 2015, when he got a transplant, and I'm absolutely delighted to say that he's going great guns. He starts high school, he starts DL, where we were the school we were at, Ross. He starts DL after the summer. So it's listen, some always say to people, you know, you never really think of these things, but, you know, be a donor if you can, because some families' unimaginable sorrow became our salvation, if you like, you know. So I got in touch with a lot of good friends from school around about that time, because I had I'm not great with social media just because of the job I do. I try and keep a low profile. But I had gone back onto Facebook because there's so many people were asking. So I had gone back on, or I had joined Facebook, I should say. So I got back in touch with people. We had a charity night for Drew in the October. We got him up the road, and I got his transplant in the March, and we got him home in the June 2015. So he's gone from strength to strength, and just a miracle. So yeah, it's a charity that's very close to our hearts, and it's always one I try and promote.
Yeah,
thank you for allowing me to do so.
No, don't be silly. That's the least I could do. And thanks for sharing, Andy. And I'm so delighted that it's gone well. Brilliant. So look, it's been great catching up, Andy. I've really enjoyed this. It's been a good laugh going back over old times. So thanks for joining, and can't wait to catch up with you when I get back up to Scotland next time. All right. Thank you.
Definitely. Cheers. Thanks, Ross.
What a great insight into the life of a sports journalist from Andy Devlin. I really enjoyed catching up with Andy, even though he has embarrassed me by telling me that I'm the best golfer he's ever played with. Now that I'm over that bombshell, I've really enjoyed the show, and I hope you have too. If you've got any feedback, please send it to linkbygolf@yahoo.com. Find me on Instagram, linkbygolf2024. I hope you can go back and enjoy the 5 other episodes that are out there already. And in the meantime, have a great day. Thank you.